Hello and welcome to CXOTalk. It is Tuesday, July 18th, 1 p.m. and on the East Coast here. I'm in Washington, D.C. today. Last few shows have been from elsewhere in the world. It's episode 245. We have a very special guest, Jonathan Reichantal, CIO of the City of Palo Alto and luminary in the CIO world in general. Welcome, Jonathan.
Hi, good to see you, Dion.
Yes, so great to have you. I was excited about this show, and I know a lot of other people have been too. And as an aside, by the way, for those of you watching, we'd love for you to ask Jonathan your questions on the CXOTalk hashtag on Twitter. We'll be monitoring those and taking your questions. So, Jonathan, you've been on the show before, so welcome back. Can you tell us, give us an update on where you are, your current role, the CIO challenges that you're having right now?
Oh, I'd love to give you an update. Hey, by the way, I just want to say congratulations on 245 episodes. That's quite an accomplishment yourself with your team.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's mostly Michael Krigsman, the show founder. He's been gracious enough. I now have the CIO show on Tuesdays. But thanks. Yeah, it's been a great run.
And I'm just thrilled to be on again with you guys. Love to share our story. A lot has happened just over the last 2 years. I think it's approximately 2 years since we last spoke. Tech really matters in a government context. Tech really matters in a city context. And I think one of the things that's starting to happen is we're getting the story better. There's a big difference between, kind of a piecemeal approach to solving important but disconnected city issues and creating a sort of a cohesive strategy that looks at cities as big, complex machines that have lots of interdependencies. And we begin to take a sort of strategic approach. And I think that's the big change that I'm seeing not only in the city of Palo Alto, but also on a global basis. Is the topic is now really well elevated. How can we bring technology to bear on the lives of people in cities to improve livability, sustainability, and workability? To me, that's the most succinct sort of definition I can give, and the way we're all beginning to think about this. Where it was sort of a peripheral topic, I believe now the smart city or connected city, intelligent city topic is moving to the center of the conversation. And it's connecting a lot of important ideas. Last time we spoke, I was talking about the things we plan to do. And now the good news is we've a lot of things that we're doing. We're doing things in the transportation space. I hope to give you lots of examples as we talk today. We're doing activities in the climate change space. Doing things in energy, and then in the broad area of digitization or digital transformation. One of the things I've asked, I guess, about this topic is, are there common topics in cities across the world? And what we've seen over the last 2 years is not necessarily a honing in on sort of one or two or three ideas, but the beginning of a set of categories. So transportation is a big category, but it manifests differently in different cities. In some cities, it's all about parking. In other cities, it's about congestion. In some cities, it's about the conversion to electric cars or the support for electric cars. So the category is transportation, but the way in which the problem manifests and how we solve it is going to be often unique. So I think if I could summarize, it's really now we've gone from theory and visioning into a lot more action. And here in Palo Alto, we have a lot of great examples to share. And I'm seeing more and more cities beginning to act on this now.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to hear from you. Palo Alto is, practically in the bullseye center of Silicon Valley. So you're surrounded by some of the best and brightest, some of the smartest people in technology. So I wonder if you could talk about it. How representative do you think Palo Alto experience is going to be to smart cities elsewhere in the country or even the globe. I was in China a few times over the last few years, and I can't help but notice that they're building at an insane rate. Right, things like places like Shanghai are building hundreds of new skyscrapers all the time, new roads, new bridges, all these sorts of things. And in fact, do those the other question I would have is, do those types of these newer developing economies actually have an advantage over us because they're building so much new infrastructure right now?
Yeah, thank you for that sort of big question. One of the things that strikes me is the sort of statistic around the amount of cement that China is using. Just over the last decade or two, China has used more cement than the entire history of the United States. So this is sort of big time catch up at scale. And it does have advantages when you can build something from scratch. You know, in the United States, we have to often modernize our cities in place, whereas in some parts of the world, because of their rapid development, they have the opportunity to create brand new cities out of nowhere, whether it's Songdo in Korea, or Masdar in the United Arab Emirates, Yache in Ecuador, and a whole lot of new cities in Saudi Arabia. It's a luxury in some ways, but it's tough too. I do recognize the advantage that Palo Alto has. This is getting back to the core question you asked. Mm-hmm. For me as a CIO in this city, I've always said it from day one, it's such a privilege to have this role, because not only do I have the right set of sort of characteristics to help my team and I and the city manager and the mayor be successful here. Not only do we have those, but we have an engaged community that wants to see change, and of course we have this global brand that has been created over many decades. So here's one of the things about having a live conference is one's phone starts stirring. So I've gone ahead and muted it anyway. So one of those characteristics, right? One of those categories that make that I recognize and I think is an advantage here is we are surrounded by tech companies and smart people who not only do they want to create great products and services, but there is something in the DNA about Northern California, which is about contributing to community and being civically engaged and being more socially responsible. Look, I'm not naive. I understand Silicon Valley has some significant social challenges, but we have a lot of positives in that area too. And I want to be sure that we recognize that and their strengths, our ability to use the large volume of capital to invest in our communities, to do the right thing, to be engaged in issues around climate change, for example. These are things that these tech companies take very seriously for the most part. And I meet with them. They come to my office, I go out to them, and the question they ask is, how can we help? How can we be part of this mission to re-engineer, rethink our cities, create cities that are going to be great communities for decades to come? And so we have a small set of partnerships. We've done some neat work with Verizon around smart lighting. We're working with SAP and some thought leadership around transportation. And so there's a good volume of tech companies who are engaged with me. Now, I think that is a positive. And when I get to meet some of my colleagues from different cities, whether in US or elsewhere, they say, well, Jonathan, you have, this incredible advantage. And I recognize it, but I also say, well, how can you tap into the benefit that you have as a community? What is the industry that's dominant in your community, or the people that can influence change and finance change and be change agents for you? How can you engage those people that are unique to your community? And so it's a little bit harder because I have the technology advantage here. Other communities don't necessarily have that, but there are always assets, I think, in a city that can be brought to bear on this kind of multi-decade mission. Now, of course, the other thing is none of this is geographically bound anymore, right? If you are a city somewhere else in the U.S. or globally, our sort of global community now allows people to network and partner with organizations wherever they are. So you got to be smart about that.
Yeah, well, I got to believe there's smart city consortiums and other organizations where you guys can exchange best practices and so on. But yeah, so that's very interesting. You said in your introduction that when you were first on the show, you were just you were making strategies and developing plans, and now you've actually done some things. And you mentioned energy and transportation. Can you give us some concrete examples? What have you guys done? I heard you mention lighting as one of them. I think that's where a lot of cities start. But give us an update on where you are in terms of making Palo Alto a smart city.
Yeah. Let me give you thanks for the question. So, by the way, I want to just kind of correct one belief system that I think it's something that I'm sort of championing the idea around, which is no one will ever become a smart city because the baked into that statement is that there's an end state that you finish, right?
Yes.
So I go through a set of 35.
It's a journey, not a destination, right?
Right. And so do I finally go into the mayor's office a few years from now and say, we're done? We're a smart city. So, any city that is attempting to have bring to bear technology to move forward on a whole set of domains, this is ongoing. The work is never finished. But we can make progress. And by the way, we have to prepare our communities for 30 years from now, 50 years and 80 years. Imagine that type of planning, right?
Well, I know, and like power companies, when they put lines underground, they do have to do 50-year planning because they don't want to touch those lines for 50 years. But I think same thing with what you guys are doing. You need a big overarching plan because you can't eat the elephant in one bite, right? And that elephant's going to continue to grow, to stretch the analogy a bit. And that's why I've seen I've attended and spoke at some smart city and IoT conferences. And it seems like a lot of the focus now is kind of on smart optimization, saying, all right, we're going to help you save money because most cities aren't ready to invest fully across the board in a lot of different smart city initiatives just from a budget standpoint, right? So what's your experience been?
Well, yeah. Let me throw out there a sort of a few examples, and also maybe use it to talk about the budgeting component of that. There are so many things we could do, right? So we're dealing with scarcity all the time. By the way, the only thing we have in abundance in every city is data, right? And it's the one thing we don't really take advantage of. We'll probably get to that topic, but everything else is basically in scarcity, right? Time. Dollars. There's just some multiple priorities. One of the things I'm very proud of is our digitization efforts. When I came to the city a little over 5 years ago now, although I can't believe it, there was a handful of digital services. Today we have over 60 services, and they range from everything from having a full online library. You can check out books online. We have the ability to report crime online. We have a whole series of apps for reporting issues. You can even spin up the permitting process online and manage it like a FedEx parcel delivery where you see every step of the service. So there are 60 services now that people can basically do with their government here in Palo Alto, from a laptop computer, a smartphone, a tablet. They don't have to drive to a city facility, find parking, waste half their day anymore. And I think that's a very practical manifestation of this change, right? People ask, what does it feel like when you're in a community that's getting smarter or using technology? And I say it's the difference between last year you had to go to a permitting center. You took a number, you sat in a chair till you were called, you went, met some people, you probably filled out some paperwork, you probably were asked to wait again, maybe come back, and this thing went on and on and on. Now compare that to this year, where you just on your smartphone, spin up your permit, and it's completely done, asynchronously online, and it's a much more pleasant experience, right? So I think there's a lot of work to do there still in Palo Alto. We're 60 services in. I think there's more to do. We continue to push that. Many communities have a lot of work in this. Everything from all the services I've spoken about, right through to having a much better web experience, website experience. Now, the other area that I wanted to share, not only we've got the digitization side, the other area is the physical, right? And the sort of hot area right now is what does it look like to incorporate the Internet of Things in a city context? Now, the background on this in one of the projects I'm going to share right now is Palo Alto is committed to a project called Vision Zero, and Vision Zero is all about, can we reduce and eliminate traffic accidents? Particularly collisions between vehicles and people. Whether you're walking or on a bicycle. I mean, the numbers are. You
think that would be particularly urgent? Human life is involved, and so that and if you're having that issue, that seems an important place to focus, right?
It really is. I mean, the thing that I get so much joy from is that the city work is meaningful, and that's why I encourage technologists to spend time in government. It's meaningful work, and because it is about people in a very direct way. If we can make roads safer and intersections safer, we save lives. Parents can be more relaxed when their children are cycling to school. This is stuff that is deep in the heart, Yeah,
well, you're really serving the mission of the city, right? Which is to protect its citizens, and so yeah, I think that's a good one. Well, and so you bring up a good question. We have a question from Twitter, from Antonio Santos, a very well-known digital engagement thought leader. And as part of what you just said there, how are citizens being consulted by the city of Palo Alto to help build a better smart city? So how do you engage with them in terms of bringing them into the process, and that journey we talked about before the show started? How do you catch them up so they're ready for all this?
Sure. Let me quickly answer the other point, because I feel there might be people watching who are like, Jonathan didn't finish his point. Right?
Yeah, go ahead.
And then I'll directly answer the question you just asked. So talking about how do we employ technology to help with Vision Zero, right, is we are going to deploy sensors and cameras around the city whilst being sensitive to privacy issues that are able to monitor in real time the interactions at intersections. And from that, we get real-time data to be able to make design choices about those intersections, everything from how to design them physically to the timing on the traffic signals. I just wanted to sort of finish the little story there. There's a connection between the safety of individuals and deploying an Internet of Things sensor infrastructure to give us more rich data.
And that's actually a great example you can actually give to your citizens, showing that this is why putting sensors and cameras everywhere is good. It's going to save lives.
It is going to save lives, and we can't lose sight of this. This is often not abstract work. This is like this is in your face work a lot of the time. Now, you asked me about how do we engage people. I like that question a lot, because cities that's something that's a richness we have to tap into, is the abundance of incredible people with incredible ideas and voices. We need to be able to capture voices. Now, there's a traditional answer to this question, which is when people vote for elected officials and they represent on behalf of the community the point of view of the community, and the elected officials then pass down by policy to our city manager and executive team activities and priorities, and then we execute on them. That's the sort of traditional answer. So in many ways, our 9-member council members are really in charge of what I work on. I mean, ultimately, that's the bottom line. Now, more broadly, though, when we get to the tactics of a particular effort, we got to bring people into that discussion. And so I'd sort of go through a few different categories. One is that you got to turn up to council meetings. If you want to make change, you got to participate in the traditional methods of being part of democracy in America. And that is, come to meetings, come to discussion meetings, come to council meetings, come to committee meetings. And
the citizens have to meet you halfway. It's in terms of educating them and marketing them, they have to be engaged too if they expect to be engaged by the city.
That's exactly right. No, very well put there. It is today more than ever, it is a partnership of equals, right? And so we have a responsibility to enable that, and then community members have a responsibility to step up and be part of the change they want to see. Now, of course, there's an abundance of digital channels. We have our own Palo Alto Open City Hall online platform for gathering opinions. We are a community that has embraced a social network called Nextdoor. And by the way, it grew grassroots. We didn't push it as a government. Nextdoor is used in many, many communities around the US. We happen to be one of the per capita highest users of it. That's another forum. We use Facebook to some degree, Twitter not so much in our community. Email continues to be a popular channel, of course. And now, let me give you an example, though. We have a multi-year vision in the city of Palo Alto to enable the highest broadband you can get for internet access from your home. We work very closely with the incumbent technology community, the folks you'd expect, Comcast and AT&T and Verizon and others. We continue to explore innovative ways of either supporting the incumbent community or even delivering additional services on the existing fiber service that the city here in Palo Alto.
And we're gonna have a question about that in just a second. So we're about halfway through this episode of CXOTalk. We're very privileged to have the CIO of the City of Palo Alto, Jonathan Reichantal, on the show. We'd also like to thank our sponsors, Livestream, give them a big shout out for making the show possible out there. Finally, we're taking questions on Twitter for about another 20 more minutes. CXOTalk is the hashtag. Please submit your questions. And we have another one. You were talking about incumbents, Jonathan, AT&T and Comcast, who obviously have a lot of infrastructure and bandwidth and points of presence that you can build on top of. But another question from Antonio Santos, in fact, was, can the local community develop IoT solutions that can be integrated on top of the Palo Alto Smart City platform, if that exists? Is that something that really opened that up? Are you thinking about opening up that broadly, or what's your point of view there?
Okay, thank you. And just again to finish the last segment, in order to move forward with our broadband efforts on any platform in any way we can, we have a community advisory committee. And by the way, just a little anecdote for you. When we first formed this group a few years ago, we invited anyone who wanted to be part of it, and we were excited if they had specific telecommunications backgrounds to be part of the meeting. When we first met with the original group, and we went around the room and people sort of shared their backgrounds, it was pretty remarkable the kind of talent we have here. Everything from folks who were part of the original specification of certain telecommunication protocols to some of the pieces that make the internet work, and they live here and they're retired in Palo Alto. So that is another privilege, but they're a voice for us. Now, the question you're asking is an interesting one, or the Twitter user there, because I'm a big proponent of the private sector having a very strong role in urban innovation, and there are going to be times when there's a very important dependency between the innovation that you have and the way you deploy it, and there's going to be times when don't wait for government, move forward, just do it, right? And we as a government can facilitate it. We can issue the permits. We can, help with the traditional paperwork that goes with operating in a regulated environment. But more and more, I want civic innovators and technology companies to understand that they have enormous freedom to deploy technology in cities by partnering with cities just to make things happen. So there's this whole concept of the right of way, right? These are areas that you're allowed to do stuff in. I mean, as long as it doesn't break the law, of course, it's not nefarious in what it tries to achieve. But if you want to put up,
well, you're going to have the burden of what Apple had with the App Store, right? Eventually, at some point, you can do so much with the data, and you have to very carefully give out access. But of course, if you want the innovation, you have to open up. So it's really a balancing act, I have to imagine.
No doubt, and I think we're in a good place today. If your interest is deploying some sort of Internet of Things sensor network, you can use cellular technology. There's a whole range of even lower cost, short distant wireless technology now that you can aggregate into a collection point and have one point be the cellular collector and dispatcher of data. And the only thing you're really asking the city for is, can I have permission to put this on a lamppost or a traffic signal or on a building, right? So you don't need to plug into some sort of city infrastructure anymore. You can traverse it wirelessly. Now, if you want to plug into city infrastructure, ask us, and there's probably just some paperwork that needs to be filled out. So I think the bigger answer to the question is, don't wait. You'll find out what the limitations are as you sort of proceed with your diligence and through conversations with city leaders. But there's more space to innovate in cities than I think most people appreciate.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially as you were talking about when you first came on the show today, about everything's becoming so much more interconnected. And we're just in the, I like to say we're in the cave painting days of digital, right? This is early days and everything's going to become instrumented and connected. And the things that we can do are limited only by our imagination. But then, the challenge I have, I just got back from an IoT conference in Germany, and the big conversation there was security, security, security. He had to say, because IoT has become such a threat vector and it's one of the foundational technologies for smart cities. What do you say to that? How are you addressing that, making IoT a source of good things and not bad things?
Yeah. I would add to that security. And so I'm glad at an IoT conference that is an important part of the conversation. I don't necessarily think we're in a great place today in terms of the prioritization we're giving to some of this new tech. As you can imagine, most of the motivation is on winning customers, deploying tech, gaining mind share, and you don't want necessarily to commit a lot of resources to the cybersecurity piece, which, much like insurance, often it isn't directly beneficial, but it helps you when you need it, right? So I want to see us move this more to the center. Cybersecurity needs to be on the table as we have these discussions. We've made it an important part of our dialogue here at the City of Palo Alto. We are investing heavily in our cybersecurity capabilities and defense mechanisms and detection systems. We're pretty proactive on this. On the Internet of Things side of things, people now need to align with our privacy stipulations. And by the way, we're still working through this. We're working with the ACLU. We're working with some regional organizations. We're working through this. It's 2017. We're not. We haven't fully. We don't yet have this fully worked out. I mean, that's probably, and what makes it interesting for technologists who are watching, and Dion, you can appreciate this, is as we are developing, policy and moving forward, the threats are ahead of us. So we're kind of like chasing it, right? Getting ahead of this is,
well, I think everybody in technology is feeling that right now. Is that the cybersecurity community is feeling that the bad guys are now really organized, and they're maybe better funded, and they're becoming an issue across the board. So I just wanted to at least address that. I think it's much more exciting to talk about the good things that can be done for citizens with these kinds of technologies. And speaking of that, we have a question from Twitter from Scott Weitzman. We've had good conversations with online. And he asks a question I wanted to ask, which is, how can artificial intelligence be better utilized in services for citizens? Have you had any experience in those 60 services so far? Are there any lessons learned or pain points you can share with us?
Well, we're keeping an eye on this, and I'm following a lot of the developments. I think AI in a government context is still relatively young, and it's probably not if you're a civic leader like myself, it's probably not yet a priority. But if you're enlightened, you need to be listening and reading and observing. I'll give one what probably appears to be a relatively simple answer to this. I've been fascinated by the emergence of chatbots. As over 2 billion people in the world now spend time every week on Facebook, and I've really got comfortable with Facebook Messenger and that platform. The paradigm of being able to have a dialogue with what appears to be another messenger colleague, but have AI actually be powering it, I think is becoming very compelling. And one of the experiments we did, in fact, just in the last 4 weeks, was to spin up a experimental chatbot on Facebook that would allow a person to type in just a normal natural language question, and have that question go out against our city website, specifically the IT area of that site, and come back with a meaningful answer. So rather than a Google search where you get 1,000 responses or 10,000 in the chat session, it would come back with one specific answer. If I typed in the question, what is Jonathan's phone number, or can you list projects that were completed in FY17, it would come back with an answer. So I've been impressed with that AI type technology. I think we're going to explore it as we develop the next generation of our city's website and the city's channels for interacting between community and the government. So that's kind of a near term. I think a lot of the AI is going to be baked into some of the infrastructure, for example, around supporting self-driving vehicles. Some of our defense mechanisms on the emergence of drones. And so it's going to kind of show up in many, many different ways.
I think you're right. It will be baked into a lot of the IT systems that you'll be deploying for smart cities. But we had the CIO of the city of Asheville, Jonathan Feldman, on the show, and he was also talking about bots as a great way to provide better 24-hour customer service. A place to ask questions and get access to city information in smart ways. And so I think chatbots are kind of the gateway technology drug for AI. It's easy to get started, non-threatening, fairly straightforward to understand, and there's thousands of bot solutions out there. Of course, they're all maturing, but that's I think that's fascinating. We still have about 8 minutes left. So let's talk a little bit about the relationship between IT and city government. I have to expect that in Palo Alto, which is such a tech-centric city, it should be good, right? But how do my background's in IT, and I was an enterprise architect for many years. I know that IT people love technology. They don't necessarily love the business side of things and learning the civic side. Do you have those kinds of issues, or is the relationship really good? Or can you give us how are you dealing with the IT business divide?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting question, because you have to ask, what's the motivation for people who come to work for government and a city? One of the things that's happened over the last 5 years that I've been in the city is we've had quite a few retirements. We've seen some turnover, and I had the chance as a consequence to hire a whole new set of technologists for the city. And so that's helpful, because I get to, with my colleagues, create a culture based on hiring. And that's often one of the ways in which you can shape the future of your organization. Mm-hmm. But the really kind of localized interest here is, how do we hire people when technologists could work for all the amazing tech companies that are
that's the big question,
right? And so if I said to you, well, we get people because we pay more, I'd be lying, right?
Right, exactly. Well, the public sector, that's the big problem. Here in DC, people make an appeal to those who are very mission oriented, those who want to do good, that it's just as important as them having a high salary. So they can get people who are more have that kind of giving spirit and are more inclined to work for a public sector for less pay because they get to work in a mission oriented environment.
Well, I think that's exactly right. I think that's what we've done here is we sell experience and we sell meaningfulness. So it kind of gets back to your question is, the relationship between IT and the city. You're coming here because you want to make a difference. I'm no longer trying to hire you for a career. If you stay and you have a career here, that's awesome. But if you just come for 3 or 4 years, that's really cool too, because you probably want to get back to the private sector anyway. So we sell meaning, and people are here. The relationship between my team and all the different divisions and departments is strong. People believe in libraries and our police and our fire and our public works guys, and so it's going to be a little unique because the experience is different. I know I worked for 20 years in the private sector. I know the relationship between IT and the business is often contentious and doesn't go smooth. But I think we've groomed a very positive experience here in the city of Palo Alto. I think by having my team members immerse themselves in departments. Can I give you just one quick example? We have a program that we do every year. It's on everybody's appraisal here on the IT team, it's called Walk in Your Shoes. It's real simple. Everybody in the IT team has to spend at least 4 hours shadowing a colleague outside of IT. And every year you have to choose a different person. And it shouldn't be a friend. It should be somebody you've never worked for. So we want people to spend 4 hours with a librarian or with a utilities engineer. And it builds trust. You learn about someone else's job. They learn about yours. You share issues. And we require that. You get appraised on that work. So that's one of the ways in which we...
And we had a lot of CIOs on the show, including Joanna Young last week, who said that very same thing. That is proven to be the most effective onboarding tool, is to see what people in the city, city workers actually do on the job, as opposed to hearing about it in meetings, right? So that's great to hear that data point.
Certainly.
And so we have time for a couple more questions. So what about smart cities? Isn't that an attractive technology? Doesn't allow you to draw and access better talent? And as a related question to that is, how much does culture play in the types of changes that we're making, right? So you have to bring in this new talent, and you have to skill up all the people you already have on smart cities. Is that a challenge? We were talking about this briefly before the show started, and you were saying that the city, the IT people can't pull too far ahead of the rest of the team in order to be successful.
Yeah. There's a lot of great questions there. I mean, this is the issue of where are the projects, the innovation projects, relative to the mind share of the recipient. I mean, that's something that is an art probably more than a science often, right? If you as a IT team and as an IT leader are pushing forward with something you think something that is a response to a need, but you're pushing quickly and the organization's not ready, you're going to learn about that pretty soon. By the way, actually, it will manifest in ways that are pretty obvious. People will reject the technology, and so I think every IT leader has to confront that. What was the first question you asked?
Well, I'm just suggesting that the smart cities actually might be a big talent attractor, right?
Right.
But at the same time, you're bringing these people who are going to want to do so much, and is that going to kind of leave the rest of the organization behind? So that's what I find those two together.
Thank you for the reminder. So great question. I don't think that we're using it quite yet as a recruitment tool. I wouldn't like to sort of focus too exclusively on the technology. I think when we try to sell the experience here and why this work is so important, I think we have to go back to the people experience, what it means to live in this community or to live in this region and benefit from the way in which the service is delivered. There could be a challenge, I think, over the medium to long term of overselling the technology at the cost of the bigger mission, which is, livability, workability, and sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
The three sort of objectives. I think for a technologist, we're selling a bigger set of qualities. We might call it smart city, or smart city might be part of it. But look, if you're listening to this and you never considered to work in a government, you're going to work on cloud, you're going to work on AI, Internet of Things, big data. Some of the coolest work in the world,
Yep.
and it's the hardest, most complicated, and most meaningful work. So I think there's a great story to be told, and it's a great place to play, to spend either a part or your career.
Yeah, no, fantastic and very well said. So, Jonathan, one final question. So, you've now been the CIO of the City of Palo Alto for a while now, and you have deep expertise, 25 years of expertise in the IT field. Given everything that's going on right now, what advice would you have to CIOs just coming into a role like yours in the public sector, based on the lessons learned that you have? What would you tell them that could help them?
Well, when I was thinking, I thought you might ask this question. So I could give a few sort of cliched answers. Be a good listener. Work with the business.
Which is still true, but yeah, that's you had to do that anyway.
You got to do that anyway. People have heard all that. I go back to sort of the question: what is it that I do that has helped me be successful, or to be able to deliver value consistently? And one of the things that I see as a fairly continuous characteristic is a persistence, right? It is a persistence. It's very easy to be distracted. It's very easy for people to say no. And it doesn't matter if it's in the public sector or the private sector. When you're an IT leader, and you, by definition, you're a disruptor in many ways, because you're probably at some point going to change the status quo by introducing new technology. There's a lot of reasons for people to say no or to push back. And so if you didn't have maybe the strength or the courage of your convictions, you might stop. You might say, okay, you might go in a different direction. And there's going to be appropriateness for that. But I would say this: if you have the courage of your convictions, you're well informed, you've engaged people, you believe in what needs to happen. It's this fundamental quality, I think, of being persistent, despite all the roadblocks that you might encounter. And persistent doesn't mean being inflexible. I don't think those are equating. I'm saying persist, but be flexible.
Yeah, and adaptable, right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, very great advice. So, Jonathan, thank you very much for appearing on CXOTalk, well-known CIO and thought leader in your own right. We really appreciate you taking the time. And thanks, everyone, for joining us for CXOTalk. Please join us again on Friday, July 21st, 4:30 p.m. ET, where we have our show founder, Michael Krigsman, will be talking with the CEO of Genpact. Thanks, and have a great day.